Thank you, Deputy. I now call on Minister Alex White.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle, and thank you for this opportunity to respond to the debate. And before I do so, Ceann Comhairle, I would like also to add my voice to the expressions of sympathy that this House has extended in the course of this debate and otherwise to Mr Halappanavar and his extended family for their tragic loss in Galway. Ceann Comhairle, as the Minister for Health said yesterday, it is incumbent upon us as public representatives to take action to make sure that the lives of pregnant women are protected and that the clinicians who provide care to them can operate within a clear and ethical legal framework. As you heard during last night's debate, the Minister for Health intends to recommend the publication of the report of the expert group on the ABC Ireland judgment of the European Court of Human Rights immediately following next week's Cabinet meeting, and that's the 27th of November. The European Court of Human Rights in the so-called ABC case found, just to recall what the court said, that and criticised the legal position in Ireland as offering no accessible and effective procedure to enable a pregnant woman to establish whether she qualifies for a lawful termination of pregnancy in accordance with Irish law as it currently stands, and that therefore legal clarity was required. And manifestly, legal clarity is required. There can be no doubt whatever about that. And I haven't heard a single person in the course of this debate, although I perhaps haven't heard the entire debate, but I haven't heard anybody who would disagree with the necessity for legal clarity now to be brought to the situation arising from the case in the European Court of Human Rights. But Ceann Comhairle, when we last debated this issue, I think it was in April of this year, this Dáil agreed to await the outcome of the expert group. That was the position taken by this Dáil on that occasion. The Dáil voted. You may be aware that we have a parliamentary democracy, and a vote was taken. The bill that was brought forward by Deputy Daly was not taken by the House on the basis that the Dáil would await the outcome of the expert group. And whatever validity there was to the argument that that represented a cop-out, whatever validity there was to that argument, and I don't believe there ever was any validity, but if there was any validity to it, it has disappeared now. Because what the House has been told is that that report will be published next Tuesday. Next Tuesday. It will be published. It will be available to all of the colleagues in this House to carefully consider, to look at, and to see what it says. Now, you can then decide whether you think the report is a cop-out. But look at the terms of reference that, that Judge Ryan's group was given. To examine the judgment of the European Court of Human Rights, to elucidate its implication for the provision of healthcare services to pregnant women in Ireland. And thirdly, and I'd just like the House to pay attention to this aspect, to recommend a series of options on how to implement the judgment. I emphasise how to implement the judgment, not whether to implement the judgment, on how to implement the judgment, taking into account the constitutional, legal, medical and ethical considerations involved in the formulation of public policy in this area and the overriding need for speedy action. Now, the expert group has been tasked with bringing forward recommendations for options, I repeat, on how to implement the judgment of the European Court of Human Rights. And that is what I expect that report will do. And everybody in this House will have an opportunity to look at that. So, Ceann Comhairle, if I could just say, the motion that Sinn Féin, I'm not going to engage, there's been lots of argument over and back at the House in terms of people's motivations and everything else. We leave that aside, we're coming to the end of this debate, and I think in large part it has been a good debate. But actually it nets itself down to one issue. Because one of the things that the Sinn Féin motion calls for is the publication of the report. That's going to happen. The other thing that the motion calls for in relation to the outcome of Strasbourg is that there should be legislation. Now, I have no doubt that the option of legislation will feature in the report of the expert group. How could it not? How to implement Strasbourg is what they're asked to do. Clearly, manifestly, legislation will be one of the options that report will tell us about. Maybe there'll be another option in the report as to how to deal with this, because they're asked to deal with the various options. You can test that yourself. You can look at that next week. You can ask next week whether, in fact, the report the various different options. You can have a proper debate in this House as to which of the options, not whether we take action, I repeat again for the third time, but which of these options, as addressed in the report, is the proper way forward. And Deputy McLaughlin, I think it was earlier on, said that he would be opposed to a statutory instrument. That a statutory instrument you couldn't address it by way of a statutory instrument. But I'm sure Deputy McLaughlin knows that you can't have a statutory instrument otherwise than in connection with a piece of legislation. A minister can't promulgate a statutory instrument unless it's linked to an act of the Oireachtas. So just be careful when you make these claims that people are proposing doing this thing in particular ways. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at what the report says. And
sorry, would you please allow the deputy make his point? You've got silence when you're making your point, so please, thank you.
And if, of course, Count Curley, we were to pass the Sinn Féin motion tonight, because, of course, it's not legislation. At least Deputy Daly brought forward, as a parliamentarian, proposed legislation to the House. But, of course, if we were to pass the Sinn Féin motion tonight, it would make absolutely no difference. Not a whit of difference. It's a motion calling for something to happen. It's not legislation. Let's wait and see what happens next week. Pádraig always gets very exciteful at these companies really being challenged. Just wait, because if Sinn Féin are serious about the outcome that they say they want, and I'm prepared, unlike perhaps a lot of other people, to give at least some of them the benefit of the doubt that they are, although I sometimes wonder when I hear some of those remarks that just heard now. If you want the outcome, if you want to serve the women of Ireland, if you want to ensure that there's legal clarity, if you want to actually bring about proper solution to this problem, well, then you wouldn't play games with a motion calling for something to happen at some stage. You would actually give yourself the time that you will now have within 1 week. As I say, if whatever validity there was about this cop-out argument a year ago, there's none now. You're going to have the report next week. You're going to have a chance to test all the options. You're going to be able to see what the various possibilities are, and you're going to be able to actually bring forward a change, as we've all said, as the Taoiseach said, doing nothing is not an option. So what do we have now? We have the report going to Cabinet. We have its publication next week. We have a debate in these Houses, and we have the government commitment to make a decision. Now, that, it seems to me, Count Corley, when you put it together, adds up to a great deal more than a motion simply calling for something to occur.